You look around the room, it's pretty easy to see how we are all different. Different ages, different genders, different colors. Inclusive, nuestro acento no se quedan atrás. Cada cual con sus diferencias y sus idiosincrasias. And then there are differences among us that are less obvious. Some of us have more money than others. Lately, it seems like any random guy in a $6 t-shirt can be a billionaire. It has me questioning my choice of clothing. Some of us sit in different positions on the pyramid scheme, the org chart. Sit in different positions on the org chart. Some of us tip the scales on patience and kindness and tolerance. And then some of us, through suffering and struggle, have had to learn to live with the unimaginable. Here's something, though, that we all have in common as we sit here together. None of us knows how much time we have left. We might have 10 minutes or 10 days or 10 years. For all intents and purposes, it's almost impossible to know. If you had an unlimited amount of time, you would do all the things and see all the people and go to all the places, but you don't. So the question is, what are you doing with the limited amount of time that you have left? What's your plan? What are you working on? You're here today in these chairs because you've worked just enough to get you here. Some of us have worked a little harder than others to run the same mile. And some of you have had the good fortune of being handed a well-run head start. And then there are those people who, they just get lucky. Now, I wouldn't recommend writing down luck as a source of income on that mortgage application. So let's keep that in perspective. For just a brief moment in our life's journey, the different roads we've traveled, they all converge here, in this room, in this conference. And it's here where we share the following truth. If today, right now, we stop working, we stop progressing, we stop moving forward, we lose. We lose what we've worked for, and we lose our chances to make tomorrow a better day. Now, judging by the fact that you're all here and not out on the beach, tells me that no one here has given up yet. I wish I could look into the future and tell you that tomorrow you won't give up, but I can't. None of us can. What I can do is promise you this. It doesn't matter how much money you have or don't have. It doesn't matter who you know or what you do for a living. I promise you this. The clock never stops ticking. Benjamin Franklin said, only two things in life are certain, death and taxes. He failed to mention that the clock ticks forward, and at exactly the same pace for all of us. It's death, taxes, and a ticking clock, guaranteed. Now, how you spend your time can impact your tax bill, certainly. And even delay death to some extent. But nothing to do with taxes and nothing to do with death will stop the hands of time. Maybe your own personal clock will stop. It will stop one day. But until then, you're not here alone. We've got children, wives, and husbands, and parents, friends, and coworkers, and neighbors. In some respects, these people expect us to make the best use of our time. For our own benefit, sure. For the greater good of society, yeah. But selfishly, and rightfully so, these people undoubtedly consider the time we spend with them to be precious. Just a few months ago, Stephen Colbert asked Keanu Reeves what he thinks happens after we die.
What do you think happens when we die, Keanu Reeves?
I know that the ones who love us will miss us.
That's the best answer I've heard to that question in my life. The ones who love us will miss us. So eloquently put, and yet so poignant. When our individual clock stops ticking, it doesn't for everyone else. It doesn't for the ones who love us. It affords them the lamentable opportunity to say, gone too soon. Or, you could have done so much more if you only had time. So how you spend the limited amount of time that you have should definitely matter to you. But don't lose sight of the fact that it also matters to the ones who love you. On the surface, it may be difficult to tell who here among us is ambitious or complacent or apathetic. It gets easy to judge as you watch people's routines at how they spend their days, their weeks, their months, and their years. Some of you all wake up before sunrise and immediately start exercising. Good for you. Someone out there meditates during their lunch hour on a regular basis. Namaste. And then there are those that drink these green kale things for dinner instead of eating dinner like the rest of us. More power to you guys. You'll notice, though, that the complacent and apathetic, they aren't the ones telling you stories about the roads they've traveled or the people they've met or the things they've done. It's the determined and driven folks with all the great stories like, hey, I went to this conference in Puerto Rico. It was fantastic. Now, life, as we know, isn't an Instagram timeline. Every waking moment isn't filter perfect or picture perfect. The kale and meditation before sunrise becomes unsustainable after a while. Life happens. And who really exercises at 4:30 a.m. every day for 35 years, besides The Rock? No one. Life happens. We go through ups and downs and highs and lows. But the people that are the most productive, the people that have covered the most ground, they're the ones who exhibit focus and consistency, resilience throughout their life's journey. In fact, research published in 2012 has shown that people are more likely to accomplish a single goal at a time rather than spread themselves thin over numerous goals. The authors of the study found, and I'll quote this for you, when people form specific plans for multiple goals, the difficulty of goal execution becomes more salient. Commitment falters, and people fail to follow through on their good intentions. Here's another scientific sesquipedalianism. There's a fancy term, as if the previous term wasn't fancy enough. There's a fancy term known as automaticity. Automaticity is the ability to perform a behavior without thinking about each step. This in turn allows the pattern to become automatic and habitual. It comes with a catch. Automaticity only occurs as the result of extensive practice. Research tested and confirmed that automaticity is stimulated by the presence of an active goal. Essentially, you need a goal, just put you on a path to automaticity. But it's going to take a whole lot of effort and probably a whole lot of time. So if you're planning on waking up tomorrow morning and popping in a P90X DVD, meditating at noon, having a kale smoothie for dinner, and you think you'll be able to keep that up and transform your life in, say, 90 days, and recognize that the scientific literature isn't necessarily against you, it's just recommending a slower, more long-term approach. Denzel Washington tells us a personal story. Early in his career, he auditioned for a role in a musical, but as you all might know, Denzel can't sing. So, it's no surprise he did not get the job. But he kept auditioning, kept working at it. 30 years later, at the same exact theater where he did not get the job in the musical, he wins a Tony Award for Best Actor in a Play. 30 years later. You don't need to be a scientist to figure that one out. It took dedication, discipline, consistency, and resilience. 30 years worth. Life's a marathon. It's not a sprint. The masterful, modern-day Canadian poet, Aubrey D. Graham, a poet known by millions of people around the world, and just about everybody here as Drake, Aubrey here referenced that cliched line in one of his songs. It's a marathon, not a sprint, but I still gotta win the race. Yeah? Nobody? Poetic exceptionalism. I think Shakespeare would have been proud. By the way, that line is unofficially credited to another great modern-day American philosopher, Philip C. McGraw. You guys might know Philip C. McGraw as Dr. Phil. He's here smugly judging me and my life's choices. We've all heard the phrase used a million times, and we all use it ourselves. But let's take a moment to recognize the profundity of the metaphor. Marathons are hard. They're not easy. They take lots of practice and planning. In your preparation, you'll stumble, you'll fall. Injuries come with the territory, and you need time to recover and rethink your plans. It sounds a lot like life, where everyone who struggles, where everyone who participates struggles, undoubtedly. And going through struggles doesn't make you weak. It doesn't mean that you are a weak person. It's practice. It's strength building. To build your strength, you have to struggle. It's undoubtedly the only way. There's no other way. Children learn how to walk. They struggle, they fall. This is sad. Part of life. This guy working out, struggling, getting stronger. That soreness, that isn't the sign of your weakness. It's a sign that your strength is building. You become stronger by struggling. And to become stronger, you then run further. And you meet new people and experience new things. But you put in the time, and you put in the work, and no one's going to do it for you. You have to do it yourself. You set your pace, you build your endurance, and you remain consistent. Life isn't a sprint. We're not blitzing, we're not training for speed, we're going along. Denzel level, 30 years long. A lifetime. And remember, you're not alone in this marathon we call life. In fact, I invite you all to join me on a personal journey. A journey through my mindset as I walked out of a burning skyscraper on the morning of the single worst tragedy our nation has faced. On a single day during peacetime. When I was in my early 20s, I rode a sport bike to work. It was fun and fast and impractical, and I got wet. But it was cool. Scary sometimes, but cool. I worked in Tower 1 of the World Trade Center on the 85th floor. This is a photo we took from our office. This was maybe April or May. Working up there was also scary sometimes, but for less than obvious reasons. You see, the resume I submitted for that job listed bachelor's degree as in progress. After 4 years at La Interamericana de Aguadilla, here in Puerto Rico, 4 years, I barely scraped by with enough credits to complete an associate degree. I was forced to write in my resume, in progress. So I would stare out of those windows at my office, both proud and ashamed. Proud to be there, sure, with my cool bike parked a quarter mile below me, but ashamed at the very real fact that I was completely unprepared for the challenges I was about to face. If you ever wonder what the gap is between pride and shame, that space in the middle, that gap, lost time. As I zipped down the West Side Highway early that Tuesday morning, I opened the visor of my helmet to let in the crisp 65-degree air. The bright blue sky and hardly a cloud in sight, that was a near perfect late summer morning. Most all of us remember that day as just spectacular. Here I am enjoying a lovely ride to work, completely unaware of what's happening in the skies above me.
Is that American 11 trying to call?
We have some planes. Just stay quiet and you'll be okay. We're turning to the airport.
And who's trying to call me here? American 11, are you trying to call?
Nobody move. Everything will be okay. If you try to make any move, you'll injure yourself and the airplane. Just stay quiet.
It's about 8:30 in the morning when I park my bike and ride the express elevator up to the 85th floor. While in the hallway, I noticed above the door, next tower, right above it, was one of those red and white exit signs. I thought to myself, I've been here 6 months, and this is the first time I see that exit sign. Of course, I didn't pay any attention to that. I mean, who looks around and notices exit signs? There's one over there. So I grabbed coffee, settled in at my desk, and was engaged in typical morning chatter with two other coworkers. Soon after, we heard what sounded like a rocket. We didn't hear it coming from a distance. We only heard the split-second, ear-piercing zip, and then we felt an explosion. The entire building jolted. Empty chairs rolled a few feet. Computer monitors shook violently. And ceiling tiles, all these ceiling tiles, they all came crashing down around us. I looked out the window and froze at the sight of a fireball, just right outside my window. I watched as the bright flame rolled down and then billowed up, turning black as it rose. We grabbed what we could and hurried to leave, and I glance at my coworker and I see this horrified look on his face. And he tells me he does not know where the exit is. But I had just seen it 3 minutes ago. American Airlines Flight 11 crashed into the World Trade Center at 8:46 a.m. on Tuesday, September 11th. The aircraft, carrying 92 people and 10,000 gallons of jet fuel, was traveling at 465 miles per hour. For comparison, a Tomahawk missile travels at 550 miles per hour. The plane hit the north side of the North Tower between the 93rd and 99th floor. Our office was also on the north side. I would have seen it coming. We were 8 floors below it. As soon as I opened the door to the exit, I felt a stream of cold air rushing upward and past me. The inferno above us seemed to be pulling air and feeding itself with the cold air-conditioned air from lower floors. I remember my first few steps down were a mess. My feet couldn't gauge the distance between steps, and I struggled to find the handle. Just go down as quickly as possible. It was a frenzy. Our race down came to a complete stop when we encountered a traffic jam of people. Of course, we yelled for them to run, to get out of the way. We were aghast and breathing heavily, and they were calm. Contrast was striking and felt dangerous. How could we be so frantic and they be so calm? They must have not seen the fireball, I thought. Some people in the crowd turned to us and with a calm and friendly tone told us the line was moving. They conveyed and instilled in us their sense of patience, a sentiment that was echoed by the exhausted firefighters we spoke with. The exodus down the narrow and crowded stairwell was slow. It was friendly, but it was also surprisingly quiet. It's 9:03 a.m. We're still more than halfway up, somewhere in the 60s or 70s. 17 minutes have gone by since the first explosion. We have no idea what happened or what's about to happen. United Airlines Flight 175, carrying 56 passengers and 9 crew members, was traveling at 590 miles per hour when it struck the south side of the South Tower between the 77th and 85th floors. The sound of the explosion and the rumble we felt above us caused a wave of panic in the stairwell. Folks commented things like, "I can't die in here." Others speculated what may have caused the sound. We really didn't know. We were inside of the stairwell. Amid all that, I was battling my own inner turmoil. I had begun thinking about what my legacy would be. I was 24 years old. I had hardly any real work experience. I hadn't traveled. I hadn't seen the world yet. And I barely had a formal education. I felt incomplete. I was ashamed at the thought of having squandered away precious time. Years gone with absolutely nothing to show for it. Had I died that day, my family would have remembered me as someone they loved and were proud of. Sure. But I felt, deep down, they would also think of me as someone who failed to make good use of his time. Gone too soon. You could have done so much more if you only had time. It's 9:36 a.m. Imagine for a moment that you were about to have your final thoughts right here, right now. What is the one thing you wish you would have done if you only had more time? It's 9:37 a.m. 189 people die in an instant as American Airlines Flight 77 crashes into the Pentagon. 64 people on board the plane, 125 people in the building. Of course, we had no idea what was happening outside the confines of the stairwell. And in the confines of my own mind, rather than succumb to the confusion and morbidity of those shameful and regretful thoughts I was having about my own life's journey up until that moment, I tried to find a mental safe space, to think happy thoughts, times of despair, if you will. I envisioned a distant future where I would grow to a gray old age without any of those regrets, without that shame. And in doing so, I made myself a promise. I promised myself that if I survived, I would finish my education. I imagined everything in my life would somehow connect to that single goal. Through it, I would find love, happiness, live a productive life, and eventually fill that void. As we continued on down the stairs, I came to this realization. The calm and patience that went viral in the stairwell needed to be matched by my own sense of determination and perseverance, and also by a newfound commitment to make the best use of my time, if I had any left. Those would be the tools I would use to make that vision a reality. Patience, determination, perseverance, resilience. It's a minute or two after 10 a.m. We made it outside just over an hour after the first explosion. Although I had resolved what I was going to do with my life in the long term back in the stairwell, I had no idea what the immediate future held for me, if I still had a job or how I was getting home. But I was breathing crisp, fresh air again. It was invigorating. I felt alive. I felt empowered. And I felt safe. One of the first things we did when we got outside was, naturally, pause to look up. We saw thick black smoke billowing from the Twin Towers, from our office. The enormity of those buildings is dwarfed by the size of that plume of smoke. It was a stunning sight. Of course, we didn't hear it, but 290 miles away, United Airlines Flight 93 was crashing in Stony Creek, Pennsylvania. It was headed towards Washington, D.C., the White House or the Capitol building. We don't know.
Tuesday, 9:47 a.m.
Hi, baby. Baby, you have to listen to me carefully. I'm on a plane that's been hijacked. I'm on the plane. I'm calling from the plane. I want to tell you I love you. Please tell my children that I love them very much. And I'm so sorry, babe. I don't know what to say. There's 3 guys. They've hijacked the plane. I'm trying to be calm. We're turned around, and I've heard that there's planes that's been flown into the World Trade Center. I hope to be able to see your face again, baby. I love you. Bye.
End of message.
The shouts of police officers got our attention and quickly got us moving again. I must have walked just a few steps when I heard a loud crackle coming from above. It's 10:05 a.m. I look up and see the top of Tower 2 leaning towards me. This wasn't over yet. I needed another path to safety. This time I didn't have one. I looked through the chaos in search of a way to outrun a falling building, flying debris, and to avoid another traffic jam of people. In my path was a TV news cameraman. He stood out because he was the only person facing the falling building and not running from it. He hoisted one of those large cameras onto his shoulder, stood his ground, and committed himself to facing whatever would come next. I had, of course, no time to ponder this man's courage. I ran right past him and on down Fulton Street. As people frantically sprinted, stumbled, and fell to the ground, that monstrous plume of dust easily swallowed smaller buildings and then swallowed me. I knelt against the car, took a deep breath, put on my helmet, closed the visor. As bits of debris pelted me on the back and bounced off my helmet, the eerie hissing and rumble of the collapse settled into complete silence. And with it came complete darkness. From within my helmet, I tried to take a small breath, but my mouth and my throat were quickly filled with that dry taste of ash. I thought, not here. I can't die here, not with this. I saw a picture in my mind of a limp, lifeless body, his last moments huddled against the parked car, where he waited to die. Helpless, alone, and terrified. Then I thought, wait a second, what if I live? If I live, that image of me cowering, of me kneeling, that image would haunt me for the rest of my life. I would forever know that I did not have the strength, that I did not have the courage to rise up and save even my own life. How could I go on living like that? One option was to stay kneeling and hope. In doing so, I would risk dying suffocated by dust. I couldn't imagine that. As I knelt there, the little bit of oxygen in my lungs became a very real limitation very quickly. And my heartbeat felt like a ticking clock. I had to do something right then and right there. What I did was decide against complacency, against apathy. In my mind, I raced through the last few things I saw. I remember seeing a group of people up ahead, no more than 5 or 6, were darting left into a building. In what felt like an actual epiphany, red in the face, adrenaline rush. I estimated that I was kneeling exactly where they entered that building. I had no idea if this dust cloud was toxic or how long it would linger. So this was it. This was my shot. This was my only shot. So in the complete silence and total darkness of the aftermath, I stood up. I stood up and I oriented myself with the hood of that car, and I made the most perfect left turn of my life. With a few steps forward, I reached the exterior wall of a building, and then with a step or two to the side, I felt the wall's edge of an entrance, and then the glass doors of a lobby. The cool smoothness of glass never felt so sweet. I squinted, and through a dusty visor, I saw a blurry image of a crowd. My estimation was correct. The path I chose was right for me. Once inside, while the crowd huddled away from the glass doors, I found a working landline telephone at the security guard's desk. I called my mom. I was a kid. I was 24 years old. Told her I was coming home.
We're going to show you some videotape now that I think if you have youngsters around, you might want to pay special attention to it, because the portrayal of the violence is extremely graphic. So take a look.
I found a small washroom in the lobby of that building. After locking the door behind me, I paused for a moment to look at myself in the mirror and take in the enormity of what had just happened. The white dust on my hands and face reminded me of that image I had of me at a gray old age. I thought to myself, yeah, this is your second chance. After washing away the dust, I rose with cold water still dripping from my face. I leaned in to that mirror and I looked into my bloodshot eyes. With a cracked voice, I said to my reflection, let's go home. In the 2.5-hour walk it took to get home, the feeling of life-threatening danger was slowly being replaced with that newfound sense of determination. To hug my mom again, to see my family, to start on the next leg of this race we call life. One of the most vivid memories I have of that day is the blurred and narrow view of the route I ran to escape the building collapse. Sure, it was confusing and not at all a straight line, but it contained the destination I committed myself to reaching. Every year on the anniversary of September 11th, I'm reminded of that memory, and I'm reminded of the metaphorical destination I promised myself I would reach. For 18 years, I've worked on finishing my education. Patience, determination, with perseverance, with resilience. By the way, you all know you never finish your education, right? I started on this journey that has no end. Deciding to live a purposeful life does not necessarily stem from having life-threatening experiences. And trauma isn't a prerequisite to establishing a sense of agency, to mastering time management. Recognize that the path you're on, that's yours to control. It's predicated upon how you got here today, what you envision for your tomorrow, and how you make use of time. Would you stay kneeling, cowering, knowing you had one opportunity left? Would you throw away your shot? Or would you stand up? Would you rise up and take your shot? My mom hugged me while I was wearing this shirt when I got home on the afternoon of 9/11. She hugged me as I wore this shirt again under a graduation gown for an MBA earned a decade later. And then about a year or two, I plan to hug my mom, my wife, and my 2 boys as I wear this shirt again, and probably for the last time, under a graduation gown for a PhD that I'm currently working on. A national tragedy set me on a path that made me who I am today. That's certainly not what I hope for any of you. What I hope is this: I hope you commit to making the best use of your time, to spending and sharing the limited amount of time that you have with the ones who love you. Reject complacency. Reject apathy. Do things that matter to society. Do things that matter to your family. Do things that matter to you. Do things that matter. Do things. Yes, we struggle. Yes, it hurts sometimes, and it's hard work. Marathons are hard. I hope you commit to running life's marathon as if your life depends on it, because in some respects, it does. I know how precious time is, and I want to thank you all for sharing some of yours with me today. Thank you.